This is Mr. Gallo here, and I'm sure I've had many of you at some point or another, but if you don't know me, I'm a science teacher, particularly a life science teacher here at MCA. And Ms. Powers and I have been kind of scheming a little bit back and forth early this semester about interesting ways that we might be able to jump into each other's live lessons and do some guest lecturing and give each other's students a different perspective on the content they might be learning. So I know you're all learning about our ancient ancestors, and what I thought might be interesting for us to do today is look at some of the unique physical advantages that your ancestors had, and you still have today, that actually propelled us right to the top of the food chain. This really comes down to the concept of survival of the fittest. But the thing is, most people believe survival of the fittest means being bigger or faster or stronger than something else. And that is true sometimes, but in other cases, we have these little tiny, innocuous, obscure traits that actually are the reason why we were able to climb to the top of that food chain. So I'm going to jump right into it here, and let's start off with the first one, sweating. You're probably saying to yourself right now, how can sweating possibly be a survival advantage? How did sweating help us get to the top of the food chain? Well, here's the thing. Most other organisms can't sweat. We're one of the only ones on Earth that can. In fact, have you ever heard the saying, oh, I'm sweating like a pig? Oh, it's kind of an oxymoron because pigs can't actually sweat. So if you understand how sweating works, basically your body excretes salty water onto your skin, and that water is really good at capturing heat. So the heat kind of gets sucked out of your body, goes into that water evaporates, and you're left cooler for it. It's kind of like having liquid cooling for your body. And again, other organisms can't do this, and our ancestors noticed this very early on. So they used this knowledge to develop an advanced hunting tactic. It was called persistence hunting, or endurance hunting. So what they figured out is that most animals were much faster or stronger than we were, and we couldn't compete with them directly in speed or strength. And it was dangerous to do so even when we wanted to. So what they figured out is that if they scared something much faster than they were, that animal would sprint away. And then what our ancestors did was they would basically just casually jog after that animal, all the while sweating and getting rid of that heat, knowing that the animal couldn't. Every time it sprinted, it was accumulating more and more heat that it couldn't deal with. And they figured out that if they did this for about a half a day, eventually the animal would get so hot that it couldn't continue. And it would literally just stop and lay down and die. All our ancestors had to do was basically walk up and grab the thing. No physical altercation, very safe way of hunting, and so effective that it was in use for about 2 million years. It even predates, organized pack hunting before we had really advanced tools. Our first example of really outsmarting our prey, and it's only possible due to the advent of sweating. The next one I have for you, kind of a package deal here, opposable thumbs. So what's an opposable thumb? Well, if you take your thumb right now and you rotate it around, you can almost point your thumbs at your fingers in opposition of your fingers. Right? And what this lets us do is grip things. We're one of the only organisms on Earth that can grab. Can really grab onto and manipulate in a fine way tools or objects. Primates can do it too. They have strong grip, but there's not much else besides us too. So we used opposable thumbs and fingerprints. You may not realize this, but your fingerprints are actually quite rough. You have 2 extra layers of skin. Everywhere else in your body you have 5 layers of skin cells, and on your hands and feet you have 2 extra. And the microfolds and the extra layers make your skin fairly rough. And if you've ever done a lot of manual labor, you notice that your skin actually gets rougher on your hands the more you have to really use them in a hard way. So what these 2 things let us do? Well, they let us grip objects and manipulate them in a fine way, and they let us do it in slippery or non-ideal circumstances. We could still grab onto our tools when our hands were bloody or sweaty. We could still swim down into the bottom of a lake and grip onto a clam or some aquatic animal that we wanted to eat and drag it up to the surface. We could jump into water with a spear and do some spear fishing and be able to hold on to those tools. So we had the ability to use tools, manipulate them, and we had the superior intellect to develop new ones, and that led to developing weapons and other tools that were also, a huge advantage in a world that didn't have any innovations. So what we did with this is we consistently developed new methods, new items that would basically substitute for our physical weaknesses, right? So we may not have had claws or talons or teeth, but we could make a spear. This is a 400,000-year-old spear as an example. And that spear would basically substitute as having a talon, except it was 6 or 7 feet long. So we were actually able to craft for ourselves tools that were in many cases stronger than the naturally occurring weapons that we were up against, that animals possessed. And this continued to obviously evolve over centuries, over millennia, getting more and more refined to the point where we could really physically dominate with our tools the majority of wildlife that we would encounter. Next one I have for you, the ability to taste bitterness. And it's bitterness in particular. Now, taste in general for all organisms that have a tongue is key, right? It lets us know what foods provide a lot of calories and a lot of nutrients for our body, and things that taste good give our body what we need, generally speaking, and things that taste bad might be toxic or might be not what our body needs. But there's a class of chemicals out there, substances called alkaloids. And alkaloids are really potent, strong chemicals that do something powerful to our body, right? And the trick is you can only ingest these in tiny, tiny little doses. So for example, aspirin. A little bit of aspirin fights fever, painkiller, blood thinner, all beneficial, but too much aspirin damages your liver and can kill you. So what we developed is this very fine ability to taste bitterness for these special chemicals that we can only have in small, small doses. This includes things like aspirin, morphine, caffeine, and a lot of the other beneficial chemicals that were early sources of medical treatment, but could only be ingested in tiny doses. So what we would do is we would taste these things, and if they were fairly bitter, we knew we could only eat a little bit of them until the bitterness was overwhelming and we kind of had to stop eating them. But it was like a medicine detector for our early ancestors. This is actually where the ability to gather and synthesize medicine comes from. So the next one I have for you is fontanelles. And if you don't know what these are, if you've ever seen a newborn baby, just born, you'll actually notice they have these kind of soft, squishy spots in their skull called fontanelles. And you can actually feel them. They're kind of like, pliable. And the thing is, a newborn baby's skull is pliable. It's actually not set. So you have these kind of concrete pieces up here, right? These set pieces. But then the gaps in between, these little suture joints, are not set until you're a little bit older. So how is this a survival benefit? Well, we're much smarter than other organisms when we're born. A baby human comes out of the womb ready to learn and observe and take in far more information and process far more information than other baby animals. So the trick was we have to have a bigger brain, right? A baby's brain is huge compared to the rest of its body. So we had to figure out, evolutionarily speaking, how can we give birth to a baby that has a giant brain? So the physical adaptation was to allow for a squishy head so that I could fit down the birth canal. So your head is actually, when you're born, squished into place as you travel down the birth canal. And you'll notice that they put the little hats on newborns because they have a bit of a cone head. And then after a little bit of time, that skull kind of starts to set and the cone head goes away. And then over the next few weeks and months, the skull will firm up and set. But before that, the plates in your skull actually kind of move around like the continents on the ocean a little bit. And that was actually the way that humans evolved to give birth to highly intelligent babies. And the last one I have for you here, persistent cultures. So other animals are pack animals. Now they group up and they pursue common goals, and that's not necessarily unique. But what humans did is they grouped up and they took it to a new level. Right? And so they grouped up, they gathered more food, they pooled the resources, and they pursued common goals. But the new thing that we did was we took care of the basics, the food, water, and shelter, and that freed up people to pursue other interests, right? So, hey, Bill, you're going to go get all the water today, and Sarah, you're going to go do all the hunting, and you're going to get enough food for everybody so that Joe doesn't have to worry about where his meal is going to come from. So what does that free Joe up to do? Well, invent new things, discover math, invent technology, work on building new tools, make some pottery to store these things so that we can survive over a winter and things like that. So the specialization let us continually advance the human race because all of our bases are covered. And this is happening still today. You don't have to go out and worry about, hunting in the wild. You don't have to spend 6 or 10 hours of your day chasing down animals to get food. You just buy something from the grocery store, and that lets you focus on other activities. And that one shift, that one adjustment of the basics being taken care of, freed up enough of our time that we have been able to linearly progress civilization, with some setbacks here and there, but linearly progress civilization to where it is today. Always adding, inventing, improving, discovering consistently over the history of the human race. So this is probably, above all, the biggest reason why we've been able to sort of conquer the planet, take over the planet, become the dominant species. So that's all I have for you today. Hopefully I showed you a couple cool things, and you are maybe looking at your ancient ancestors in a different light, and I hope you found it interesting. All right, thanks and have a great day, everybody. Bye.